Welcome to Mind Set in Stone podcasts, where we dive deep into the most compelling books on the shelf. Join hosts Dave and Poppy as they uncover the stories, themes, and ideas that shape our understanding and inspire curiosity. Get ready to explore the big ideas that leave a lasting impact. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, always fun to, dig into some really interesting stuff.
Definitely. And this time, you've brought us a collection of material that's all about cultivating a positive mindset, right?
Exactly. We all face challenges and setbacks in life, and it's really about how we approach those tough times. And the centerpiece of this collection is a real classic, The Power of Positive Thinking by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. A lot of people swear by it.
Right, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're aiming to do in this deep dive is to kind of distill the most practical and useful insights from all these resources, get to the heart of what can actually help us develop a more positive outlook and really build that resilience.
Sounds good. And not get too bogged down in the theory or anything.
Exactly. We want to keep it actionable, stuff you can actually apply in your daily life.
Makes sense. Now, I noticed that Dr. Peale's work and some of the other material you've selected covers a lot of ground. I mean, it touches on all sorts of areas where, a positive mental approach can make a real difference.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. You see it in everything: overcoming personal problems, improving your health, relationships, even boosting your energy levels. It's all connected.
It really is. So in this deep dive, I guess we're going to focus on the core principles and techniques, right? The stuff that helps us build that positive inner state.
Exactly. We're looking for those aha moments, where you see how your thoughts, your mindset can have a direct impact on your experiences and the results you get in life.
Love those aha moments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where do we begin? What's this sort of foundational idea here?
Well, the one that really jumps out again and again is the sheer power of our thoughts. That's kind of the cornerstone of everything we're talking about.
Okay, the power of our thoughts.
Right. The idea is that our thoughts aren't just, passive reflections of our lives. They actually have the power to shape our lives. They influence how we feel, how we act, and ultimately the outcomes we experience.
So it's not just about thinking happy thoughts and hoping for the best.
Not exactly. It's more about recognizing that our thoughts are active agents. They have a real impact.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can learn to cultivate more positive, constructive thoughts, we can create positive change in our lives.
So like our thoughts are the seeds and our experiences are the kind of the harvest.
That's a great way to put it. And in The Power of Positive Thinking, Dr. Peale really drives this point home right from the preface. He talks about people who've experienced new life, new power, increased efficiency, greater happiness, simply by putting these principles into practice.
Wow, that's quite a transformation. New life, new power.
Right. It's pretty powerful stuff. And there's this really illustrative anecdote early on in the book about a man who was just completely bogged down by negative self-belief. He felt totally sunk.
He was stuck in a rut.
Yeah. And what started to shift his perspective wasn't some complex psychological analysis or anything like that. It was actually a very simple principle he found in the Bible. He talks about it as scientific counseling, a more practical, approach to managing your thoughts.
And that seemed to really resonate with him.
Yeah, and I think that's significant, It suggests that these principles can work for people from different backgrounds with different belief systems.
Whether you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective or a more secular one, it's about the practical application.
Absolutely. And it highlights that creating a positive mindset isn't just about wishful thinking. It's about having concrete techniques, practical tools for managing your mind.
So it's not just a feel-good thing. There's real substance to it.
Right. And later on, we encounter this really striking quote from Stonewall Jackson. "General, never take counsel of your fears."
Oh, that's a good one. Never take counsel of your fears.
Yeah, it's such a powerful reminder, right? Fear can be so paralyzing. It can keep us from taking action, from pursuing our goals, from really living our lives to the fullest.
It can hold us back in so many ways.
And the advice that follows that quote is really direct, It's about actively filling your mind with thoughts of faith, confidence, and security.
So it's like replacing the fear with something positive and empowering.
Exactly. It's about intentionally cultivating a more positive inner dialogue, one that supports you and propels you forward.
Okay, that makes sense. So we're talking about the power of our thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's about being deliberate about what we allow into our minds.
Right. And that leads us very naturally to the idea of cultivating a peaceful mind.
A peaceful mind.
Ah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty appealing, especially in today's world.
Yeah, and it might seem like a bit of a lofty goal, but the sources we're looking at present it as a real achievable state of being.
So how do we get there?
Well, there's this really interesting contrast drawn between two people. One who had just a terrible night, just full of anxiety and worry.
They were stewing in their problems.
Exactly. They got an earful of trouble, as the source puts it, and it completely ruined their sleep.
And the other person.
The other person had a grand night. They went to bed feeling peaceful and content.
So what was the difference?
The difference was in how they prepared for sleep. The one who had a good night had this, what they called a go-to-sleep plan.
Oh, go-to-sleep plan. Okay, I like that. Tell me more.
Well, it involves a few key steps. First, you review your day, but you do it in a very intentional way. You reflect on the good things that happen, the things you're grateful for.
So it's about focusing on the positive, even if it was a tough day.
Right. And then you make a conscious effort to forgive anyone who might have offended you or wronged you in any way.
That can be tough sometimes, but I can see how letting go of that resentment could be really freeing.
It is. It's about releasing that negativity so it doesn't, weigh you down. And then you engage in prayer or some form of reflection, connecting with something larger than yourself, or just finding that sense of stillness within.
And finally,
you actively entrust any lingering worries to a higher power, if that resonates with you. Or you simply let them go, acknowledging that you can't control everything.
so it's a very deliberate process of mental and emotional decluttering before you go to sleep.
Exactly. You're creating a sense of peace and serenity within, which makes it much easier to fall asleep and wake up feeling refreshed.
That's so interesting. I'm definitely going to try that go-to-sleep plan tonight.
I think you'll find it helpful. And there's another really interesting idea that comes up in the sources, the idea of a physician prescribing not medicine, but a Bible verse.
Really? What verse is that?
It's from Romans 12:2, and it says, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." And the suggestion is that so many of the ailments we experience, whether they're physical or emotional, could actually have their roots in negative thought patterns.
So it's about the mind-body connection. That our thoughts can have a real impact on our physical well-being.
Exactly. And the sources talk about the importance of what they call frequent mental catharsis.
Mental catharsis.
Right. It's this deliberate practice of emptying the mind of all the negative emotions that can build up. Fears, hates, insecurities, regrets, guilt, all of that.
So it's like intentionally letting go of all that baggage.
Precisely. And the idea is that by consciously making that effort, we can experience a lot of mental relief. It's like taking out the mental trash.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes it feels like I'm carrying around so much mental clutter.
Well, that's what this practice is designed to address.
Yeah.
And there's this really vivid image used in the sources. It's about dropping all my worries overboard at sunset.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah, imagine yourself on a ship, sailing away from all your troubles. It's a very effective visualization technique for letting go of the things that are weighing you down.
So visualization is another important tool here.
It is, and the sources suggest bringing to mind peaceful scenes, things that evoke a sense of calm and tranquility, like a beautiful valley at dusk, the moon reflecting on calm waters, a peaceful shore.
It sounds so relaxing.
Right, and combining those visuals with what they call suggestive articulation, which is basically repeating calming words aloud.
So you're engaging both your visual and auditory senses.
Exactly. And the point is that both our internal imagery and our spoken language can have a profound influence on our inner state.
Interesting. It's like we're actively shaping our emotional landscape.
Right. And speaking of language, there's this anecdote about a nervous man on a train who found peace and comfort simply by reading the Bible.
Just the act of reading.
Yeah. And I think it illustrates the power of words. Especially words that hold meaning for us, they can really have a tangible effect on our mental and emotional state.
It's like they have the power to soothe and calm us.
Yeah. And it's not just about what we read or tell ourselves internally, but also the conversations we have with others. The sources talk about how engaging in negative talk can really set a negative tone for the whole day.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely experienced that. You get sucked into complaining or gossiping, and it just brings everyone down.
It does. But on the flip side, If we make a conscious effort to bring more positive and encouraging attitudes into our conversations, it can have a really beneficial effect on everyone involved.
Like positivity is contagious.
Exactly. It can spread just as easily as negativity, maybe even more so.
So we're talking about being mindful of our thoughts, our words,
Yeah.
the images we focus on. It's about creating a positive mental environment.
Right. And one more element they talk about is the importance of silence. There's this really insightful quote from Thomas Carlyle. Silence is the element in which great things fashion themselves.
Wow, that's beautiful. Silence is the element in which great things fashion themselves.
Isn't it? And it makes you think about how much noise we're constantly bombarded with in modern life, all the distractions, the constant stimulation.
It can be overwhelming.
Sure.
And I guess silence gives us the space to kind of reconnect with ourselves, to hear our own inner voice.
Exactly. It allows for deeper insights to emerge, for creativity to flourish. And, the author of The Power of Positive Thinking shares his own personal experience of finding a healing effect in the peaceful scenery of Hawaii.
So our external environment can have a real impact on our inner peace.
Absolutely. But it's not just about our present surroundings. The sources also recommend revisiting peaceful scenes from our past, using our memories to tap into that sense of calm and tranquility.
It's like having an inner sanctuary that we can access whenever we need it. Okay, so we've talked about the power of thoughts, the importance of a peaceful mind. What else is key to cultivating a positive mindset?
Well, another important element is energy.
Energy.
Right. And it's not just about physical energy, although that's important too. The sources talk about spiritual energy as well.
Spiritual energy.
Yeah. There's this anecdote about a friend who makes it a point to go to church to get his batteries recharged.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's simple but effective. It's about connecting with something larger than yourself, something that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning, and that can really re-energize you.
So it's like plugging into a source of power outside of ourselves.
Precisely. And the sources even quote some Bible verses that speak to this idea, like Isaiah 40.29, which says that God giveth power to the faint.
And what was that other one you mentioned?
Acts 17.28. It talks about how in him we live, that is, have vitality and move, have dynamic energy, and have our being attain completeness.
Wow, those are powerful words. So it's about recognizing that our energy, our vitality, can come from a source beyond our physical selves.
Right. And the idea is that when we connect with that source, whether you call it God, the universe, or something else, it can infuse us with strength and energy that we might not otherwise have access to.
And how do we make that connection?
Well, one way is through prayer, but also through our thoughts, our intentions, our overall mindset.
So it's about cultivating a certain inner state.
Exactly. And there's this interesting description of a highly effective and energetic individual who's described as being emotionally well integrated and also a soundly religious person.
So there's a connection between inner peace, faith, and energy.
Right. And the sources even talk about aligning our work with what they call God's rhythm to avoid unnecessary exhaustion.
God's rhythm, what does that mean?
It's about finding a natural flow in our work, a sense of harmony and ease, rather than constantly pushing and striving.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And then there's this story about a person who felt profoundly touched after a spiritual experience and experienced a real boost in their energy and well-being. It just illustrates how powerful that connection can be.
It's about tapping into a source of strength and vitality that's always available to us.
Right. But it's not all positive, of course. The sources also talk about how negative emotions, especially unresolved guilt and fear, can really drain our energy.
Yeah, we all know how much energy it takes to hold on to anger, resentment, or worry.
Right, and they give these examples, like the patient who couldn't sleep because of unresolved guilt and the prominent citizen who was living in constant fear of exposure.
So these internal conflicts can really take a toll.
They can. And the point is that actively seeking forgiveness and resolving those inner tensions can lead to a real renewal of energy and inner peace. It's about letting go of what's holding us back.
It's like freeing up all that energy that was being used to suppress those negative emotions.
Exactly. And then there's this interesting idea that even staleness can diminish our energy. It's about a lack of new input, fresh ideas, when we get stuck in a rut and stop learning and growing.
So we need that constant flow of new perspectives and inspiration to keep our minds and spirits engaged.
Exactly. It's like a mental and spiritual circulatory system. We need that fresh inflow to prevent stagnation.
I like that. It's about keeping things moving, keeping our minds active and engaged. Okay, so we've talked about the power of thought, cultivating a peaceful mind, and generating constant energy. What else is there?
Well, another incredibly powerful tool that's discussed in the sources is prayer.
Prayer. Now, I know some people might be hesitant to, embrace this concept, especially if they're not particularly religious.
I understand that. But what we're talking about here goes beyond just traditional religious practices. It's about harnessing a very real and powerful force.
Okay, I'm listening.
So in the sources, prayer is presented as a very practical means for solving personal problems. It's not just about asking for things, it's about aligning yourself with a greater power, tapping into a source of wisdom and strength that can help you overcome challenges.
So it's about connecting with something larger than yourself.
Exactly. And there's this great story about a discouraged individual who was advised to try prayer power when they felt like all other avenues had been exhausted. And the sources offer this really practical formula for what they call creative prayer. It's called prayerize, picturize, actualize. And it's really simple. The first step is to prayerize, which means talking to a higher power or even your own inner wisdom in a very direct and simple way. Just lay it all out there. Express what you're feeling, what you're struggling with, what you desire.
So it's about being honest and authentic.
Exactly. And then you picturize. You vividly imagine the outcome you desire. You create a mental picture of it as if it's already happening.
So it's about using visualization.
Right. And they give this great example of a wife who, during a period of separation from her husband, would consistently visualize him sitting at home in his favorite chair, happy and content.
And what happened?
Well, they eventually reconciled. And the suggestion is that her persistent visualization actually played a role in bringing that about.
So it's about putting that intention out there, holding that image in your mind.
Exactly. And the final step is to actualize, which means taking concrete action towards your goal with the belief that it will come to pass.
So it's not just about sitting back and waiting for things to happen. You have to take action.
Right. But it's about taking action with faith, with the conviction that you are supported, that things will work out.
That makes sense. Now, what about those who have trouble with prayer? Some people find it difficult to connect in that way.
I understand that. And there's this interesting anecdote about someone who found it helpful to actually fall asleep while praying. They believed it allowed their subconscious mind to absorb the prayer more effectively.
Interesting. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There are different ways to connect.
Exactly. And even the author shares an experience of praying for someone who had a very negative attitude and observing a positive shift in their behavior afterwards. They attributed it to the power of their prayer thoughts.
So even if you don't pray in a traditional sense, directing positive thoughts and intentions towards someone can have a real impact.
It can. And the analogy used in the sources is that our brains are like 2 billion little storage batteries. And the idea is that these batteries can send off power through our thoughts and prayers.
So we have this incredible potential within us to direct positive energy out into the world.
Exactly. And the sources offer some practical suggestions for making prayer more effective, like being very specific in your requests, truly expecting a positive outcome, approaching it with positive thoughts, and expressing willingness to align with a greater wisdom, whatever that means for you.
So it's about surrendering control, trusting that things will unfold as they should.
Right. And even praying for those you dislike.
Really? Praying for those you dislike.
Yeah, it's about extending compassion and understanding even to those who challenge us. It's a powerful way to transform negativity within ourselves.
That's profound. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The power of thought, cultivating inner peace, generating constant energy, and harnessing the power of prayer. Is there anything else we should touch on?
Well, there's one more key concept I'd like to highlight. Creating your own happiness.
Creating our own happiness? That sounds pretty empowering.
It is. The sources really emphasize that happiness isn't something that just happens to us. It's a choice we make, a habit we can cultivate.
So it's not about waiting for external circumstances to change. It's about taking control of our internal state.
Exactly. And there's this really insightful observation from a lawyer who noticed that his wife seemed to manufacture her own unhappiness.
Manufacture her own unhappiness.
Right. And it highlights the fact that so much of our unhappiness is actually self-created. We get caught up in negative thinking patterns, we dwell on the past, we worry about the future, and we end up making ourselves miserable.
It's like we're sabotaging our own happiness.
In a way, yes. And the sources stress the importance of not adding to our own unhappiness, especially considering that life already throws us enough curveballs.
So it's about not making things harder on ourselves than they need to be.
Exactly. And there's this great anecdote about a man on a train who simply stated, "I make it a habit to be happy."
I make it a habit to be happy.
Right. And it's so simple, yet so profound. It's about making a conscious decision to cultivate happiness, to make it a part of your daily routine.
So how do we do that?
Well, the sources outline a very specific technique. It involves making a mental list of happy thoughts, things that bring you joy, things you're grateful for.
So it's about intentionally focusing on the positive.
Exactly. And whenever negative thoughts pop up, you consciously dismiss them. You don't give them any power.
You don't engage with them.
Right. And then, as you're getting ready to start your day, you deliberately plant happy thoughts in your mind. You set the tone for a positive and joyful day.
It's like a mental hygiene routine for happiness.
Exactly. And they recommend using affirmations, like the one from Psalm 118.24. This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it.
This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. That's beautiful.
It is. And they suggest personalizing it, saying, I will rejoice and be glad in it.
So it's about claiming that joy, making it your own.
Exactly. And beyond affirmations, they talk about the importance of love and goodwill as fundamental principles for a happy life.
Love and goodwill.
Right. And they tell this heartwarming story about Ralston Young, the red cap, who spread happiness and joy wherever he went simply by being kind and offering words of encouragement.
It's about those small, everyday acts of kindness.
Exactly. And they quote Tolstoy, who said, "Where love is, God is, and where God and love are, there is happiness."
Where love is, God is. That's a powerful statement.
It is. And there's this businessman who had a card that simply stated, "The only way to have a friend is to be one."
That's a great reminder.
It is. It's about putting those principles into action, being the kind of person who attracts love and friendship.
So it's about creating happiness from the inside out, both in our own hearts and in our interactions with others.
Right. And there's this really interesting account of a gathering where people were joyfully sharing stories of how spiritual power had transformed their lives for the better.
Sounds like a pretty positive group.
It was. And it really challenges the notion that religious or spiritually minded people can't be happy. They were radiant with joy.
It sounds like they found a deep and authentic happiness rooted in something beyond themselves.
Exactly. And they even quote John 1.4, which talks about the light of men.
The light of men.
Right. And the idea is that this light is visible in the faces of those who are truly happy, those who are connected to something greater than themselves.
Look at inner radiance.
Exactly. And the overarching message here is that we have the power to choose happiness. By consciously and consistently practicing these principles, we can shift from creating unhappiness to cultivating a deep and lasting joy.
That's really empowering. So we can choose to focus on the good, to cultivate positive emotions, to be kind and loving, and to connect with something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final key principle, the power of expectation.
Expectation.
Right. The sources suggest that what we expect often has a huge impact on what we actually experience.
So our expectations can actually shape our reality.
They can. And there's this fascinating story about a businessman who learned what he called the magic of believing simply by consistently expecting the best.
The magic of believing. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, he started to expect positive outcomes in his business and personal life, and he was amazed to see how things actually started to shift in his favor.
So his mindset created a self-fulfilling prophecy.
In a way, yes. And they give another example of a baseball team whose performance improved dramatically when their collective mindset shifted from doubt to expectation.
So they started believing in themselves, and that belief translated into better results.
Exactly. It's about the power of shared belief. But on the flip side, there's also a story about a woman who desperately wanted to get married, but her critical and domineering attitude actually ended up pushing potential partners away.
So her negative expectations were sabotaging her goal.
They were. It's about recognizing that our expectations, especially in relationships, can have a profound impact on how things unfold.
So if we're constantly expecting the worst, we're more likely to attract negative experiences.
That's the idea. And then there's this really inspiring story about a vacuum cleaner saleswoman who achieved remarkable success simply by expecting to make a sale on every call.
She believed in her product and her ability to sell it.
Exactly. And she would even affirm, God helps me sell vacuum cleaners.
God helps me sell vacuum cleaners.
Right. It's about combining that positive belief with focused action.
So it's not just about passive expectation. It's about taking action with confidence and conviction.
Exactly. And the sources really drive this point home with this quote from Mark 11:22-24.
What does it say?
It says, "Have faith in God. Whatsoever you desire, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them."
Whatsoever you desire, believe that ye receive them, and you shall have them.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is, and they present it as a formula for getting what you want. First, you have faith. Then you ask for what you desire, specifically and without doubt. And then you believe that you've already received it.
So it's about aligning your thoughts, your beliefs, and your actions. And there's this Midwestern businessman who realized that expecting the best actually gave him a strange kind of power to create conditions that produce the desired results. It's like he was actively participating and shaping his reality through the power of his belief.
That's amazing.
And the sources recommend a practical exercise for cultivating this mindset. They suggest affirming, "I expect the best, and with God's help, will attain the best," at least 10 times every day.
So it's about intentionally conditioning our minds to expect positive outcomes.
Exactly. It's about programming ourselves for success and happiness.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into cultivating a positive mindset, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, the most important principles we've explored are the undeniable power of positive thought, the importance of nurturing a peaceful mind, the idea of tapping into spiritual energy for vitality, the effectiveness of prayer and focused intention, the empowering realization that we can choose happiness, and the incredible impact of our expectations.
And these aren't just abstract concepts, right? The sources provide a lot of concrete techniques that we can actually put into practice.
Exactly. So as we conclude, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. Which of these principles resonates most strongly with you right now? And what's one small, specific step you can commit to taking today to start integrating it into your life? Remember, as you change your inner world, your thoughts, beliefs, and expectations, your outer world will begin to reflect that transformation.
That's a wonderful takeaway. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope these insights inspire you to cultivate a more positive and fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
See you then.
We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a spark of inspiration. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and check back for more episodes as we dive into new worlds of thought, one book at a time. Until then, keep your mind set in stone and your curiosity open. This has been a Big L Riz Media podcast, where big ideas meet lasting impressions.